Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back for the 3:45 Sydney time session, which is what does Linux Australia do all year? And I'm guessing the question after this, when we're not at LCA. So I'm going to hand over to Julien and Sarah, who's going to run this afternoon as a bit of an interactive session. We won't be taking questions during the session, but we will be taking questions afterwards over in the channels. So if you haven't found the channels, they're on the left-hand side. Drop the channel button down, and the one you want to search for is the Linux Australia discussion channel, and that's where you'll find what's going on. Also called the Big Blue Button Room, but you won't find that written on the screen, which had me confused for a bit. So over to Sarah and Julien. Thank you.
Hello. Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Julien. I was the Secretary for Linux Australia in 2019-2020. I was also part of the team for LCA 2008 and a couple of years on the Linux User Victoria committee as well. Sarah.
And I'm Sae Ra Germaine. I'm the now ex-president of Linux Australia, just retired. I've been on councils for 8 years now, and I hold the record. Sorry, Josh, I now hold the record. And I've also organised several conferences, several LCAs, 2012 in Ballarat, 2016 in Geelong, and 2021 and 22 online. Next.
All right. So Linux Australia is the parent organisation for linux.conf.au, PyCon.au, as well as a few other conferences, events, and user groups. It handles the being a company items for these groups. It turns out if you're running a large event, venues expect to deal with a company, AV companies expect to deal with a company, etc. Linux Australia for these events is that company, and it also provides continuity for those events. So it's not a complete fresh start for every event. Our membership is the registered voting members, those of you who have joined at Linux.org.au membership or previous URLs through past systems. But we do consider our attendees at conferences, our members of LUGs, the meetup groups we support, the subcommittees we support as non-voting stakeholders. All of you watching this talk are our stakeholders of Linux Australia. So the history of Linux Australia is that in 1999, Rusty hosted CALU, the Conference for Australian Linux Users in Melbourne, and it was bankrolled off his personal Amex. In 2001, the first LinuxConf.au, as we call it today, was held in Sydney, and Linux Australia was credited to handle the profit that event raised. Rusty gave a keynote at LCA 2019 about LCA history. Highly encouraged if you want to know more about that or to see Rusty dressed in silly costumes. More recently, PyCon.au, now very much a major second conference for Linux Australia, started in 2010. And in 2011, more formal ownership with some of the LUGs as Slug was, at least the process was started to wind Slug in, and other LUGs have gone the same way as well. I wrote this diagram up this morning because apparently that's the sort of thing I do to show that we've had a lot of people come through Linux Australia Council over the years. We've had 63 unique council members, the longest serving, ordered by their first year on council, Stuart Smith, Hugh Blemmings, Josh Hesketh, Sarah, and Russell Stewart. Of those, I've had the pleasure to serve with 3 of them and have met the other 2. I want to call out that we do have change in membership, but we also have some long-standing tenures, and that's really great. You see with some community groups that it is the same people for 20 years or more, or they can never get people to stay for 2 years. So Linux Australia has a really great midway. It'd be nice perhaps if some people stayed longer. It'd be nice perhaps if we got more views. It's hard to say which is better. And if you want to look at actual this data in readable form and not blur of pixels, the information is available on the website. We may put this rendering up. We may not, don't know. All right, so what does Linux Australia actually do? Sarah, take it away.
Thank you, Julian. So this image might be a little bit blurry. There's a lot going on here, but the council this year, last year, decided to go through and sort of document every single piece of the puzzle that we sort of cover across our community and what we do for various groups, including the LUGs and other subcommittees that we do have. These tend to fall on the 7 council members that are on council. There are subcommittees, obviously, so we've got things like the admin team and our event committees, but generally we cover all of these areas. If I could go to the next slide, please. So firstly, I'll take you through the governance piece. Now, this is the piece that we have to do regardless. We have to make sure that we've got compliance with the New South Wales government because we're actually incorporated in New South Wales. So it means that we're bound by the New South Wales Incorporated Associations Act. So we have to make sure that we've got a constitution. We do all our annual reporting. So some of you may have received the annual report the other day. We've got council meetings that we have to make sure that we minute and publish, and we do choose to publish it openly for everyone to see. There's obviously some things that we don't share, but most things are all on the website there for you to look at. We have to make sure that we have a council of some sort and make sure that we have elections and a register of members. And we have to keep these ticking along just so that if we get pulled up on compliance issues or anything like that by the New South Wales government, we can show what we need to do. So like I said, we have to keep minutes, attendance sheets for, how many times a council member has been to meetings, because we do meet once a fortnight, and we're bound by a constitution. So we have to make sure we follow the rules of the constitution as well. We also have to run AGMs, which we just had one yesterday. So as you can see, just in this section alone, we are doing a lot of administrative work, and this is just a small section of it. Now, the insurance piece, which I haven't talked about yet, is the interesting one. The organisation has grown with its requirements. So we're running more conferences, we're doing more things online, we're doing advocacy work. So we have the standard public liability insurance, we've got directors insurance, and also we've got things like volunteer insurance, because we have hundreds of volunteers each year with our events alone. And we also provide insurance for our Linux users groups as well. So if they want to hire a hall, they can use our insurance, use that hall, and that's totally covered by us. We also cover all the legal fees if there's any legal issues. And interestingly, the more and more that we move online, especially with our events, we now have to even consider things like cyber insurance. Might go to the next slide, please. This is also another big piece, is the finances. Linux Australia turns over pre-Rona, we turn over about $1 million a year. And that's just from all of our conferences. This year alone, we've turned over 270,000. So there has been a steep drop, but that's because we have a lot less events going on. Our treasurer, Russell Stewart, he's a whiz with the numbers, but he has to manage 19 Australian bank accounts, 3 New Zealand bank accounts, 4 PayPal accounts, 6 Stripe accounts, and 1 TransferWise account. Now, that's just in 1 year alone, but in a regular year that's not a COVID year, when we're doing face-to-face events, he's probably interacting with 11 or 12 budgets, because we've got all these events plus the Linux Australia budget, 10 different treasurers, and so much access and permissions to all of those bank accounts and all of those Stripe accounts, everything. And it's a lot of hours just sitting there trying to manage all of those permissions. But we also physically spend a lot of hours at Westpac. But our record at the moment is we've spent 6 hours at the Gold Coast, trying to just make sure that we've got the right people authorizing the right accounts, and taking people off and putting people back on, and making sure that people are physically there to sign for it, set up, customer accounts, all that sort of thing. And so to add to that, Unfortunately, council tends to miss a lot of LCA because we're doing a lot of the administrivia work in the background. Next slide, please. So this one, we do a lot of communications work as well. And whilst it does seem like we do a lot of, we don't do a lot of work during the year, except during LCA, we actually help with a lot of the social media. We manage all of the mailing lists, all of the chat platforms. So we've got the Matrix channel and Libero chat channels. We also have Rocket Chat now for LCA. We manage all of the newsletters, blogs, websites, annual reports, communications policies. We've got official media teams, and we've also got an admin team and a mirror team. Next slide, please.
Just call out the admin team again. They do as much work as we say as council does. The admin team does a similar amount. There is more infrastructure than you would believe behind this stuff, and some of it's being cloud hosted and some of it's actually coming back from being cloud hosted, because cloud hosting is not a magic way for it to be cheaper, it turns out.
No, definitely not.
But admin team do tremendous work. Mirror team, a little even more behind the scenes, because this is the magic stuff that your free software depends on for distribution. And that has changed a little bit in recent years as CDNs have become more widely distributed. But having those solid mirrors in Australia has been extremely helpful.
The next piece is around membership, grants, and awards. So we have on our register about 5,500 members, which is a lot of people to make sure that we have on our system and we can communicate with if we need to. We are running a Civi CRM instance on WordPress, so we've since moved from MemberDB, if you'll remember MemberDB. And it allows us to run things like our elections every year. So Linux Australia funded a specific elections piece for Civi CRM, and it's actually now used quite widely around the world, and it's become quite important piece for Civi CRM. We also offer a grants program. Now, the grants program, each year we probably go about 15 to 25K a year. And this is all the profits that we've made from the conference go straight back into the community. So if you've got a project that you want to, spin up, we will provide funds to be able to support that. We can also provide continuing funds if need be. And in the past, we've also provided tickets to go to various events. So it might be LCA, it might be DrupalCon, it might be DrupalGov, any of those sort of things. So we've also got some awards. We've got the Rusty Wrench, which is usually given out every year, and it's for people that are in line with our values, and it's named after Rusty Russell. We've also got some other awards that we do give out every once in a while, and it's our community awards. So last year, we gave the community award to the COVID Safe team for their advocacy work to make sure that the code was made public for the COVID Safe app. We also have things like we have to maintain membership policies. We also provide community sponsorships as well. So we have some organizations that approach us for scholarships. So, for example, there is a library organization called VALA, and we provide diversity scholarships to allow for librarians to attend VALA's Tech Camp. We also provide scholarships to be able to attend the NetThing Internet Governance Forum that happens every year. And this forum specifically, we make sure that the scholarships don't just go to free tickets, but it actually goes to things like childcare, food for the day, travel, all that sort of thing, to make sure that people can get access to these wonderful conferences. Next, please. The next one is, it kind of goes into two pieces. There's outreach and advocacy. And in outreach, we have a lot of subcommittees. So we have Open Source Australia, Drupal, Joomla Australia, the admin team, the Mirror team, Linux Users Victoria. We have a media and comms team. We also have a lot of groups that are in the peripheral as well. So we've got like groups like Humbug in Queensland that use our infrastructure. So we need to actually maintain a lot of those subcommittees and liaise with them and work with them to make their experiences and their interactions with their community easier to do. So, for example, I've just realized we've missed out the WordPress community, but we look after all of their meetup accounts, for example. So we pay for all of that. So all they have to do is just run the event. They don't have to think about the administrative side to that. The new thing that's come along is the Employee Assistance Program, which is, some people might be familiar. There's a lot of organizations that have it. It's actually a support program for volunteers, and it will be actually made widely available to all of our volunteers across Linux Australia and its subcommittees. So if there's any issues that you might have, or if you're going through some stuff, you can call up this unbiased group and they'll leave everything anonymous and you can call them and get support through them. They also offer things like job advice if you want to go for a new job. So they'll even go through your resume for you. So it offers a huge amount of stuff. The other thing is that we obviously look after the code of conduct as well. So when you came to this conference, you signed up to the code of conduct, and if there's any issues that may come up during the conference, it gets escalated to council. Sorry, go Julian.
I was just going to say, in our larger events, there's often an event code of conduct group where they have issues or further escalation is desired. Council can then handle from there. And that also applies to cases where, with an events code of conduct, if an incident was to happen with an organizer of an event as well.
And so on the other side, we do some advocacy work. Unfortunately, we don't do as much as we would like to, obviously, given the rest of the stuff that we also do. But we also partner with organisations like Digital Rights Watch. We partnered with Sulet Dreyfus last year in signing the letter to ask for the code to be made public. And we have done some public responses in the past as well. It really depends on volunteer effort when it comes to this sort of piece. So if you would like support in putting together public responses or government responses to anything, please do ask us for any help whatsoever, because we will put our support behind it. Next slide, please. And the last piece is our events. Now, this is probably our biggest piece, even though the rest seems quite big in itself. We have all our event liaisons. This year has been a lot easier because obviously there's a few council members on the LCA event. We've got some members on PyCon as well. And we've got some other council members in different areas. So event liaisons, we just make sure that everything's okay. We also send Linux Australia representatives to the conferences so we can act as a support for the core teams. The other thing that we do is we, with all these events that we run, so we run LCA, PyCon AU, Drupal South, Joomla Day, WordCamp, Health Hack. If you're actually interested in running one, please do get in contact with us, because we are interested in supporting more communities as well. We used to previously also support GovHack, and it's actually a bit of a success story for us in the way that GovHack grew to such an extent that they were able to go out and form their own organization as well. So we actually provided the infrastructure to start with as they were growing up. I also wanted to call out that we've got a Ghosts community, which is all of the organizers from conferences past. And all of these people provide their advice, their wisdom, their just doing things absolutely wrong kind of wisdom for us. And they're just a good helping hand at all of these conferences. So you'll look in the Rego desk, for example, it's not just the core team or the volunteers responding to things. It's actually those who have turned up to conferences in the past or have run a conference in the past. And, it's just a lovely community, and we'd like to help keep that going. Might go to the next slide, please. So what can you get from Linux Australia? Go, Julian.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, if you've got a conference you would like to see, an event you would like to see, ideally that you would like to help make happen, but if you think there's a community out there within Linux Australia's general open source community auspice category, do contact council to see if it makes sense. And it might not, but we do have those contacts. We've got those people we know who have run events, who might be willing to give you advice, who might have connections to related groups, because maybe your event isn't quite big enough to justify pulling off. But maybe we can collect 2 or 3 of those groups and have an event as a trial. This also could then become an ongoing subcommittee, as some of our events are. And yeah.
I think
at this
the
point,
other thing to... Sorry, go, Julian.
I was going to say, historically, these have been in-person events. We would absolutely be open to certainly giving assistance and pointers and helpers on virtual events. As you may have seen if you watched Ryan's talk yesterday, there is a surprisingly large amount behind pulling off LCA and PyCon using the Venulus system. It looks slick and wonderful and automated, and there's a lot more automation than there was 15 years ago, last time I had to deal with it, but it's still a tremendous amount of work. But maybe sitting on Zoom for a day, it's not a wonderful experience by comparison, but it might get you started, and we can help with that.
I think the other thing to add to that is we've also just started up the Open Source Australia subcommittee. We've had a lot of groups in the past approach us. They're a little bit funny because they said to us, "Oh, but we don't have anything to do with Linux, but we've got heaps to do with open source." So what we've actually done is start up the Open Source Australia subcommittee, so that if there is an issue with the linkage with Linux Australia, you'll still get the benefits that Linux Australia can provide, but Open Source Australia can provide that same support. The other thing is that I just wanted to do a shout out to all of the previous organisers and the current organisers of LCA and all of the events that we do run. There is so many hours of work that goes into running these events. Even running an online event, it's not easy. It makes us nervous when tickets are bought last minute because we're worried about the numbers. But it's you turning up to these conferences help Linux Australia keep going forward, and it helps us provide these grants programs. And so having these people organize these conferences is, a lot of hours of work and dedication. So we do thank the conference organizers. Next slide.
So, as mentioned earlier, for around Linux Australia's remit, we will absolutely endorse advocacy if there are issues and such to where Linux Australia's voice can be helpful. In the past, Linux Australia has used that voice quite widely. More recently, we've tried to be a bit more selective, and there are issues that everyone on Linux Australia Council is completely behind, that we know our membership is completely behind, but they're not within our remit. And we have learnt from experience that, as true as it might be, as much as we want to endorse, it's not actually helpful, either in the specific situation or for Linux Australia using our voice later on for issues much closer to our areas. So we do try and keep the advocacy clearly related.
Definitely.
And now,
so I can take this bit. So how can you help Linux Australia? So next slide, please. What, as we mentioned, we are, we may not have mentioned, we're a 100% volunteer-run organisation. We don't pay for any of our roles. We are just doing it out of the pure love of open source and Linux Australia. So what we would love for you to all do is advocate with us, run an event if you're interested. We're happy to support any event that is in line with our values. Join one of our subcommittees. There's so many subcommittees that we'd love some help with, especially in media and comms. So if you're good with the words, please do shout out. Join council. So each year we do a call for nominations, and we'd love to have you on council. Encourage application and use of our grants program. Each year that money is allocated and it doesn't go anywhere else but the grants program. And not many people apply, to be honest. So, and Russell's going to hate me for this. Please do apply so we can give out all the monies. Because we do work hard for that money and we want to give it back.
Probably should call out the grants program. It's a bit deliberately open-ended. It can be you have free software you wish to develop, you have an event you wish to run, you have an event you are running through a different auspice and would like some assistance. Major sponsorships are generally handled differently, but still the same sort of concepts. You wish to go to an event run by a different group. It would be in the before times, it would be a perfectly valid grant request if you are a Python developer just getting started on core Python to ask for a grant to attend PyCon US, for example, because that will clearly enhance the free software community and the Linux Australia community in general. So we don't have specific examples, but if you can make a reasonable claim that this will help the Linux Australia community, then yes, we will seriously consider the money for that to be a good use of our money.
So I can provide two examples. One was Software Freedom Day asked for some sponsorship money to run the event last year, so we've sponsored that. Another group has approached us to provide pizza for the year for their user group, and we're more than happy. If it brings people together, we will do that. We've also sponsored the revival of some projects that may have gone by the wayside and developers have left. So we provided funding to be able to revive the website, do some jazzing up of the documentation, and bring that community back to life again. So it's actually quite nice to see that that's going to a diverse range of causes as well. The other thing that we'd love for is volunteers to help out with media, as I said, comms, government responses, and the session selection committee. So the session selection committee is the committee that decides on what talks you attend at LCA, and they do an amazing job each year. There's about 30 people that are on the session selection committee, but we could do with more because there's lots of sessions to go through and review, but it's a rewarding experience because you get to see talks like this one. I mean, there's other talks that they've gone through, and we talk through it all and we review it, and it goes wonderfully. All right, next slide, please.
Excellent. I think we have somehow run off the end of things slightly quicker than we had hoped. As we said, we will take talks. Take questions, take discussion in the post-talk discussion video room. If you don't wish to speak, there is text chat in that room. You can ask questions on text. I expect a few of our other current and former council members will be in that room as well, and probably some story time, I suspect.
Story time's always fun. So we will see you all in that room. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah and Julian. And I think the old adage is that it takes a village to raise a child. And in this case, it takes a community to run a conference. So thank you for all your hard work and dedication. I couldn't get to the AGM yesterday. I was too busy wrangling speakers. So congratulations on your times on the panel, and congratulations to the new incumbents. Whoever you are, I will meet you soon. And looking forward to seeing all of the people signing up Having been involved in community stuff before, when I was asked to wrangle, yeah, I can do that. I've done that before. When I was asked to MC, okay, this is going to step back into my brain, but deep in the dark past, I actually did some public speaking wrangling. And believe me, that when you run carols by candlelight and you're the guy driving the car with Santa in the front seat, and the kids find you and then climb onto your boot, onto your roof, and onto your bonnet and start thumping worse than the worst hailstorm in Canberra, you're a little panicked about what happens if one of these falls under the wheel of the car I'm driving to get Santa to backstage before he's announced and Rudolph finishes. So that was a very stressful carols by candlelight all
That
those
would
years ago.
be. That
And
would
then when I
be.
got home, the person I entrusted my camera to said, "Oh no, I left that there for you to pick up." So back to the park I went to find my camera still sitting on the verge of the park where carols by candlelight had been held. But enough of my war stories. Thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to chatting with everybody over in the Big Blue Room. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.
See ya.